Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Expat Conversations with Michael Nolen. I'd like to say thank you very much for tuning in today. And if you're not familiar with our show, we are a division of the University of Guadalajara, the Institute of Investigation, Innovation, and Governance, which is headed up by Dr. Marco Antonio Cortez Gradado. Dr. Cortez was the former general rector of the university for 6 years, and then gave himself a job as the rector or president of the University of Guadalajara in Puerto Vallarta. And at that time, about 9 years ago now, I had a radio show there for 5 years and talked a lot about what was going on in the Bay of Banderas area, mainly to help the expats make their life a little bit easier. I moved over here a couple of years ago to the Lake Chapala lakeside area, and just recently we started this show here. Instead of just radio, we're putting this on the internet and YouTube so people can look at it anytime they need to and want to, and watch and learn from the guest I have. Before we go any further, I want to say thank you very much to the Monte Carlo Hotel and Resort here in Chapala, Mexico. Thank you for letting us use the facility. We film all of our shows here, and if you've never been over here, it's a beautiful facility. They have a great restaurant, about 100 hotel rooms, and one unique thing about the hotel rooms here, if you're going to take a shower or a bath, it's not just regular tap water, it's thermal mineral water, and so it's very good for your body. They also have pools around the different areas of the resort where you can go and bathe in the thermal mineral water. There's also about 8 pickleball courts, which is unique to the area, a very rapidly growing sport. And we also have a large pool, convention facilities, and a really, as I mentioned, great restaurant. So if you're going to be coming down here to Lake Chapala Society or Lake Chapala area and need somewhere to stay, please consider the Monte Carlo Hotel. It's very centrally located, and I think you'll find it really nice. As you know, the show is called Expat Conversations. We try and talk to different people that live here in the lakeside area and that do a lot for the community. And today I'm very fortunate to have a gentleman, Keith Crockett. And Keith is, I guess, the boss or part
The president
of a really unique organization called Have Hammer Will Travel. And again, Keith, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the program today. I'm going to let you explain to the audience a little bit about your history, where you're from, what brought you down here to the Lake Chapala area, how many years you've been here, and how you got involved with Have Hammer Will Travel. What kind of organization it is, what you all do for the community, and anything else you want to talk about.
Sure.
Except politics. And what else do we not talk about? Well, I can't talk about that.
You're safe.
So, thank you and very much. Welcome for your time.
Thanks so much. So my name's Keith Crockett. I'm from Canada.
The West, East Coast of you?
I grew up in the East, but lived most
Ontario,
of my adult life
Toronto,
in the West, you know.
Or over by
from
Vancouver.
Vancouver Island, Vancouver Island, for 40 years. I've had 30 some odd years in the information technology business in a whole bunch of different roles, from, coding, tech support, project management consulting, sort of quite a range of. And one of the nice things about that as a business is you get to learn in depth a whole bunch of different businesses, because as you go into an environment where it's accounting for auto parts, for instance, or I worked in government land titles for a while, and so you get to kind of drill down into the details of a whole variety of different stuff, and so it's pretty interesting. Kept me going for a while. I moved to New Zealand for a few years.
Oh, wow.
Worked down there with the banks, the 4 main banks in New Zealand, and then from there into the Securities Stock Exchange with the Wellington Stock Exchange in Wellington, New Zealand. So a whole kind of a broad.
Can I ask you to speak up a little louder?
Yeah,
The
sure.
microphone's not great. It's kind of interesting because when I lived in Puerto Vallarta, the man on the right-hand side was from Whistler, Canada.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
And the lady on the left side was from Wellington, New Zealand.
Oh, interesting.
So,
Yeah.
you know, here's an Oklahoma guy stuck in the middle of those two. I learned a lot from them.
Okay. So anyway, a varied background, but having had the experience of living in a different country, albeit an English-speaking one, certainly made it easier to contemplate a move to Mexico. Having kind of packed up a family and moved across the Pacific, you kind of have a better idea of what you're in for. Maybe not totally accurate. So, you know, I guess around about 2007, my wife and I were down on the coast here for a holiday, and had a friend of a friend who was living in Ahihi, and had an open invitation to come for a visit and see what. And so we were over here, we came over for a couple of days, and that sort of piqued our interest, and one thing led to another, and we ended up becoming homeowners here in the Lake Chapala area. So that was, I guess, quite a while ago, 2008, so 14 years ago.
Time flies.
We were here full time.
You must have been awful young when you came.
I was kind of, we were sort of noted for being youngsters at the time. It's sort of not so much anymore. Anyway, when we finally sort of, you know, arranged to be able to be here full time, you know, you can only kind of sit by the pool for so long. Most of us can only, you know, and it's different for everybody. Some people it's 2 weeks, some people it's 2 years, but for me it wasn't very long before I was kind of looking around for what am I going to do next. And I'd always kind of liked being in any kind of a workshop, you know, a metal shop, a wood shop, auto shop, just kind of looking to do something with my hands. And I was walking along Ocampo in Ahihi one day, and there was an open house for the new facility for Have Hammer Will Travel. And so I poked my nose in, and we sort of looked, and I said, hey, you know, I could volunteer here. So I put my name on the volunteers list and went home. And a couple of weeks went by, and I didn't hear anything, and I sort of thought, well, I'm going to go back down there. And basically what worked best was just kind of showing up, and it's kind of who shows up. So I started showing up, and one thing led to another, and that was probably about 12 years ago, I think. And so the school's been, the school was incarnated, if you will, or kind of began quite simply, actually, with a fellow by the name of Richard Williams, who started going out on Saturday mornings with a milk crate, a few milk crates full of hand tools, to the Mission San Pablo orphanage, and working with the kids in the morning on a Saturday morning and trying to basically show them what he could about tools and a little bit of woodwork, and basically trying to, you know, make a difference with his time.
Well, what we're talking about, the facility that they have here on the main road between Chapala and Ahihi, is a very, very modern, very up-to-date, very unbelievable woodworking facility. They have all types of lathes, saws, I don't know all the terminology, but woodworking equipment, and they build all types of cabinets,
So this
doors, all kinds of stuff like that.
This facility that we have now is actually the fourth incarnation of a workshop.
So it's been a progress,
So
a
it's
work in
kind of
progress
more-
the entire time.
The school has been many things over those years, and kind of, we really the first, beyond, once they moved on from the Mission San Pablo, that was sort of the travel part, where the travel, and of course, Richard Williams, being a child of the 50s, remembered the television show in the US and Canada, Have Gun Will Travel.
Have Gun Will Travel.
And that was where he picked up the name Have Hammer Will Travel, and it was around them traveling to the orphanage on Saturday mornings.
And he would take his hand tools, he'd go there and teach them woodworking type skills.
That's right.
How to hammer things together, how to cut things and with miter,
That's
things
right.
like that, and just help them learn something besides schoolwork.
And then the Lake Chapala Society, you know, took us under their wing and gave us space down at the back
Okay.
of the campus, and we had some a roll top storage bodega, I guess, down at the back, and we had some storage cabinets, workbenches that were on wheels, and we could wheel them out, and we'd hold classes out there under the awning for different age kids, younger kids, and some older kids. Completely volunteer run, and that continued through to about 2010 when we first got the first facility on Ocampo, and it was a space of maybe, well, I don't know, maybe 800 square feet. And most of the tools were donated by typically expats who came down with their workshop and either passed on or didn't use it anymore, and they would give this to the school. And then a few years later, we kind of outgrew that space, and we moved up onto the Carretera in Riberas, and in another facility that had some shortcomings, but there was a real kind of a wonderful transition, actually, really, that happened about that time. And we had a volunteer who joined us, Eloy Gonzalez, who was a member of Rotary International.
Okay.
And he knew kind of how to go about making a plea for a grant from Rotary. And he shepherded, stick-handled that through for us. And about 2014, I think it was, Rotary International gave to the school $25,000 for new equipment.
Wow.
And so that was really kind of a transformative event in the history of the school. It allowed us to get some new equipment finally that wasn't always breaking. That's where the lathes that you talked about earlier, where they originated. A nice 20-inch planer, a bunch of that equipment. Most of that equipment is actually still in use today at the shop workshop. The fourth iteration workshop we have now on the other side of the Carretera. Funding was an issue for a long time, of course, as we grew. Now we had rent to pay. We weren't sort of in free space at LCS anymore. We had rent to pay, and about 2010 we took on a full-time teacher, a full-time Mexican teacher, and so we had salary and sort of financial obligations there that carried on, and so the funding was a challenge, and Richard Williams actually was quite insightful. There was an opportunity arose with a thrift store that was being operated at the time in Riberas, with whom we could partner and share in the net revenue of the thrift store. And that was really kind of the beginning of turning the page financially. It took probably 4 or 5 years before we really kind of put the old days behind us. And so now, you mentioned earlier the Todo Bueno thrift store that's next door to us there.
That's how I first became familiar with y'all, because my wife likes to go to the bazaars, as they call them down here, and pulled in there and bought some things. And being a guy, I don't know, I'm different than a lot, but I can only spend like 50, 60 seconds in one of those places.
Sure.
I do the quick look around. If I don't see, hey, that's what I want, I'm out of there.
Yeah.
And instead of staying in the sun, I always kind of peek in to see what they're doing in the workshop
Next door, sure.
And it's way more interesting. And then I've learned about the school and how you help educate other young Mexicans on woodworking and wood crafts.
That's right.
To where they can possibly, if they want, go into that type of business or that type of livelihood, to become a carpenter. And because there's a lot of construction down here and other areas, and that's something that's not really taught, I don't think, in the trade schools down here.
Well, this exactly, and you're sort of putting you're sort of highlighting a key kind of element to the environment in which we try to work, and that is that a trade school is quite a common idea north of the border. Mm-hmm. In Mexico, it's not so common. That one tends to acquire those kinds of skills with an uncle or your dad or a brother. That the idea of going to a school to learn a trade is a bit of a foreign concept. I think Richard Williams' his vision was around a trade school, and over time we've kind of come to learn that we've sort of modified our mission statement. I think at the moment we kind of, it's been with us for quite a while now, is to share to teach valuable life skills through woodwork and carpentry to Mexican youth and women. And that really kind of, I think, gives us a pretty wide latitude. We certainly have had students who have gone on to work in the trades, work in construction, work in a carpinteria, but they're certainly the minority, they're not the majority. But what we do try to, there's value in learning how to read a tape measure, learning how to safely make a accurate cut. In wood, there's value in learning that Rome wasn't built in a day. Mm-hmm. And some things take weeks or maybe months to finish, and along the way there's problems to solve and scope to control in terms of where we get to. So there's a lot to be learned using the workshop as kind of the the classroom through which we can kind of share a whole bunch of different life lessons, not simply just woodwork.
And that's very important, because there's a gentleman that was one of the original founders of Cirque du Soleil, and he lived in a nice area just north of Puerto Vallarta. And I guess when he finally retired, he moved down from Canada and brought 2 trailer full of older Cirque du Soleil type equipment, and built a big gym basically, and started training young children how to do things like juggle, how to ride a unicycle, how to do a lot of the gymnastics, a lot of the tumbling, trampoline and stuff. And he wanted the kids to learn life skills that they weren't learning from any education, any formal education there in Mexico. He wanted them to learn, like, I can't juggle 8 balls, but I can throw one up in the air and catch it, and then throw one up in the air and catch it. Then maybe later on 2. Yep. And that basically taught them, if I keep trying and I keep working, no matter what it is, riding a unicycle, trampoline, doing a flip, I will eventually be able to conquer that and be able to do it. Yeah. And that's true in we need those lessons in life. Yeah. And now he went from like 4 or 5 kids, he has over 90. And he's been doing this for about 15 years. They put on a huge performance every year. But it's the value that the children and the young adults learn, that they can do things in life, that they pursue, if they practice, if they work hard enough, no matter what it is, that's going to help them for the rest of their lives. And that's what you all are all about.
I think we're all, born with a creative impulse. And to the extent to which that gets developed, either not at all or to,
well, encouragement.
An astounding.
Just a male or a female, and a different person from your family besides your parents or your brother, sister, or your grandparents, saying, hey, yes, you can do this, and that's a good job, and I appreciate it. And learning to show up on time. Yeah. And, as you mentioned, it's a project. A table or a chair just isn't built in 30 seconds. It does take time to cut each piece of wood, how to glue it together, how to nail it together, how to sand it, how to do everything to make it. And that's the same thing in life. We don't just learn to be a doctor the first day we go to medical school. It takes years. Yeah. Or to be anything else that you want to be. So it's a process, and that's very important what you teach.
To be curious and to have the confidence to persist. That, if I can't do it now, I know how to. I've got people here around here who will support me as I persist in sort of trying to learn the skill. So it's been, I laugh a little bit because I've got a student at the moment who, it's such a different experience from walking into a store and I need a table for my house. And I'm going to build a table. Well, it's how do you kind of reconcile those 2 worlds, right? And why do we make things with our hands at all? And this is kind of a forum where people can come and explore that, get some guidance from some of us that love doing that.
Well, you mentioned your history and what you did for a living. You were never a master carpenter.
No,
but
I have a story.
And I don't know if you want to consider yourself that today, but as many years as you've put into it, you've learned, and building it, taking the wood and sanding it and cutting it. First you have to engineer it and design it. You have to think about where you're going to put the legs and where you're going to put the doors, or where you're going to put the hardware and the handles. I mean, that makes people think about stuff they've never ever thought about before.
Sure.
And they take those same skills. If I can design a table or a chest or something, I could design probably a cutting block, just a big piece of wood where you,
Sure.
you know, hammer the little knife down to cut the meat up for the tacos. That's about my, you know, woodworking skills. But it's really interesting that you're helping these guys. How many people have you helped over the years, and what are the ages that you deal with?
It's interesting. We've got pictures, you know, of some of the early classes back on Ocampo from 2010, 2011, 2012. And they'll say every now and every once, it doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while, one of them will come back and walk in the school and go, you know, hi, I'm so-and-so, and
That's me.
And you look, and a few of them are actually working as carpenters, not very many, but it's, you know, you know what, I really have no idea. Over the course of a year, I would say we probably work with probably 50 people, 50 students. Some of them kind of, you know, stick with it, and some of them we don't see again. It's been, you know, you were talking about kind of my background and stuff, and of course, you know, I was kind of finished my work, my paid career as an IT project manager. And my initial volunteer involvement with Have Hammers was really, I mean, what do we do? You work with what you know. So IT, so I worked with the website, I worked with records, with kind of coming up with trying to raise the bar in terms of what was possible on the information project, if you will, for the school. But I've always kind of loved the shop. And in 2015, I found myself back in Canada for a year, and had always been interested in, there's a furniture school, if you will, in Victoria, BC, at the local college. And I applied and was accepted. And so I went and spent 40 weeks full-time in a furniture design, finishing. It was called, the name of the program is Fine Furniture and Joinery Trades. And at the end of that, I basically came away with a qualified first-year apprentice as a joiner. But what it did was it just whet my appetite. It gave me a taste of so many different specialties within the area that we call woodwork, that I've basically been having a great time with that ever since, and I'm happy to share it with students and other volunteers and stuff at the school there. But it's really kind of has been a Copernican revolution, really, in terms of my ability to kind of engage with the school and be useful to the school, because in the past I could certainly help with the IT stuff and just you know, general management kind of things, but I've now got kind of the skills and ability to help out on the woodwork side as well. So it's been kind of a real growth experience for me personally. Keeps me engaged. I certainly haven't been bored, but out of bed every day sort of.
Well, it's kind of cool to walk in the shop and hear the noises, kind of smell the wood, see the sawdust going up, and it's just a neat environment. It's like walking into a bakery and smelling the bread cooking or the pies or whatever.
30 years of going to an office, I love it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's so much
like
different.
It's such a change.
And the neat thing is, you're teaching these guys that if they are gals, if they build something and build it right and proper, it'll last a long time. I was just in London, and I went to Windsor Castle, and I went to a lot of the other castles in the different places, and I'm seeing furniture like the throne chair that Charles III will sit on, that his mother's Elizabeth sat on, that they've been using the same chair since the 1500s.
Yeah.
And it's still a very, very sturdy piece of furniture.
Yeah.
Of course, it's only sat on for about 15 minutes about every 70 years.
Yeah.
But
No,
if you build something right and make it properly and design it and engineer it and do it, it'll last for a long, long time, generations. And furniture is very important because it is something, you can make it really, really cheap out of press board and glues and IKEA not type thing. But I have some furniture that's Henry Dawn. And it's about 45 years old, and it looks as good and is as sturdy today as it was back when I first bought it. And I bought it second hand. It's probably over 100 years old. And you're teaching the kids that if they build something and do something in their life right, and out of the right materials.
Yeah.
That's the same thing. If they teach themselves in their life how to do things right, and their rules, their regulations, their emotions and everything, it'll last them an entire lifetime.
It can be an heirloom to your,
Yes.
to your grandchildren, you know, for sure. I mean, yeah, one of the things that I mean, the whole furniture as its place in the social fabric and the social history is actually a fairly interesting. I mean, it's so easy to overlook. We just take it for granted. I know I did until I sort of had a course in furniture history. But it is a really interesting component to our social history, and it sort of conveys, it says a lot about what we value and what we don't value. Certainly, you know, my experience at the college, they were encouraging us that we were designing and building stuff that was to last 100 years. And that's a different kind of mindset consideration than, you know.
Well, in your industry, the IT, I mean, when I went to the university in 1973, there was a machine that took about half of this room up.
Yeah.
And it was on a great big platform with holes in it with huge air conditioners blowing cool air. And then you had to do these things called punch cards that were about 8 inches by 3.5 or 4 inches, and they punch a bunch of holes. And you got about 80 of them or 100, and you turned them in, and it ran through a machine overnight, and it gave you about 4 sentences on a piece of paper. If you had everything perfectly,
Telling you what you'd done wrong.
if you had everything done wrong or done right,
Yeah.
if you didn't drop your box full of cards 2 or 3 times like I usually did and got them all that place. And anyway, long story short, fast forward that, those machines, those huge first early computers that were bigger than refrigerators, and it took about 8 or 10 of them together to make one computer. Now they have a laptop next to those, and then they have like an iPhone. And they say this iPhone, or whatever phone, will do 500,000 times
Yeah.
what that huge giant machine would do in just 40 years or 50 years.
Well,
It's amazing how technology is just going and going, and your industry changes every second.
I saw that.
There's guys up there in Silicon Valley that's coming up with stuff right now that next week will completely, that's why we have 55 different phones made by that fruit company.
Sure. Yeah.
Because every other week they come up with something new. And,
Wow.
and woodworking has been the same for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years.
There is certainly, yeah, if you want, but on the other hand, you know, the commercial enterprises that these days are often CAD/CAM and CNC router, and you know, to really kind of make the financials work for that kind of a business. You know, computers are more and more a part of it, and to this point, we're teaching very little of that. We've certainly made some forays into the computer drafting, for instance. At the moment, our program in that sort of specialty is not very strong. We've had some, it's interesting, I mean, the school attracts all kinds of potential volunteers with their expertise in everything under the sun. And we've had a fellow who had a successful business in the U.S. with CNC cut.
CAD design?
Furniture. Yeah, CAD design and CNC cut furniture on very high end, you know, chairs that are selling for $10,000. You know.
Chairs can sell for $10,000.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, pretty nice chair. But obviously,
That's a hell of a nice ride.
Well, it's you know, it's a designer. You know, it's a famous designer made a replica of a famous designer made chair. He's now dead. The designer, not the volunteer. So there's, I mean, it's just got so many different dimensions to it, and that's kind of, you know, if you're interested in finishes, right? You can specialize in finishes and paints and coloring, how to color
Lacquers and
Yeah.
and laminates, and I mean, furniture. We just take it for granted.
We do.
But when you really, I mean, just look at these chairs we're sitting in, and this table in front of us. It's handmade.
Yeah.
And the craftsmanship down here, as a matter of fact, I think about an hour away from here is a place, the whole town specializes, and I can't remember the name of what they call this particular design of chair and tables.
I should know, but I don't.
But, I mean, this is, you can't see, but it's pieces of wood, it's leather, it's sticks out of like a tree, and it's all nailed together or glued together, and these last forever. Leather on top of this table.
It's pretty, yeah.
The craftsmanship, the thing about Mexico is if you're looking at ceramic tile, if you're looking at other types of things, the craftsmanship is beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys can fit tile. In the house I had in Puerto Vallarta, there were 24 by 24 inch tiles. They're granite or marble, I'm not exactly sure, but there was no grout. These things were cut precisely, they were put together, and it was just as flat as you could make. Beautiful, the craftsmanship, and we don't want to lose that because Mexico's always been known to have great craftsmen.
Yeah.
And with modern technology, I'd hate to see it. I'm sure the country Mexico doesn't want to see that. They want people to learn how to do things with their hand,
Yeah.
and not by granddad telling them how to do it, or dad or uncle or whatever, but with an educated school professionals. And another neat thing that you all do is there's a lot more than just working with the wood. You have to be able, if you're going to open a shop, know how to rent a building, know how to plumb it, know how to wire it, know how to ventilate it. There's a whole lot more to starting a business or running a factory or something than just working with the final product.
Exactly.
And those are life lessons too that you're teaching these guys.
Yeah, exactly. We were just talking yesterday about how can we introduce, I mean, if we have a woodwork project, it's a lamp, well, we can now include into that some basic wiring, how to make, connect wiring into it. If we, with a table with how to cut glass, for instance, to size for a cabinet door. It opens up all kinds of, little side opportunities for a side specialty. And I think really, with young people, with my own kids, you just try to expose them to as many different experiences as you can, and cross your fingers that they're gonna gravitate to one or two of them and find, hey, you know what, I like doing this. And it's maybe, we get someone comes in and it's maybe, it's not the woodwork, but there's some other element of what we're up to that tool maintenance, for instance. I mean, we've got all those tools have to be maintained. Everything has to be sharpened. We've got one student there actually who we just talked to this morning is going to give us all a class on sharpening because he's become really good at it. He's better at it than the rest of us, right? So why not,
Well, you got two different groups of people. You have the volunteers and the teachers, and then you have the students. And you need to pull from both to continue on with the project. So for the expats that want to be involved, and most of us are, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever.
Yep.
We can work, or if you're an expat and you're coming down here and you want to get involved in something, you can work as whatever your history and your technical skills or your knowledge with the school. And how do people get involved with that? Is there a website that they can go to, or
well, we do have a
tell
website.
that, and then I want you to tell the other side of the story, how you recruit students, and how they pay for it, and then finances are always needed. You always need money, and the students need money to pay for the school if they need that, or if there's grants or scholarships.
Sure.
You mentioned the Rotary International,
Sure.
which is an incredible organization worldwide. I've had them on the show before. So if you'll kind of break down the two sides and tell them how they meet in the middle, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Well, our volunteers come to us most often by people walking by the shop and seeing the door open and coming and asking questions. What is this place? And usually, or often, having guys are drawn to tools, right? And so that's kind of where probably 80% of the people who volunteer with us come from, is they're interested in tools and, is there a role for me here? And that's often, when we retire, you really have an opportunity, and maybe even a forced choice of having to reinvent yourself or decide what's your reason for getting out of bed today. Mm-hmm. And I think often, I certainly did when I came here. I had 30 years of IT. How can I take my 30 years of IT and make that of use to somebody, or do something, with it? And I did that for a while, and it wasn't nearly as satisfying to me as getting involved in the workshop and the woodwork, that I'd kind of already had 30 years of IT, and I'm really not all that drawn to doing much more of it, and frankly, being away for 10, 12 years now, I'm pretty far out of it, I find.
Like I said, that industry changes by the minute.
It does, yeah. And so, you know, I found it really, I've always liked working with my hands, and so I find that's, and then the human connection with being able to, you know, initially, in the early days, we didn't have bilingual, but, you know, it was kind of what I call the pantomime school of woodwork. You know, we were sort of doing our best with very broken Spanish to try and, but, you know, we kept the doors open and the lights on, and now we have, you know, basically instructors who are fluent, and those of us that aren't kind of stay in the background, mostly. So the expats, that's kind of how our volunteers, and you know, we have people who aren't woodworkers at all, but they're, you know, have an accounting background, or they have kind of a teaching background, or they're just kind of interested in being how does this place work and how can I help? And certainly the relationship with Todo Bueno, which is, I believe, sponsored with the church, has opens up. We have sort of a bunch of kind of people who sit on both boards, for instance, and so there's kind of, we're kind of joined at the hip, and they've very generously supported us now for, I think, about 6 years. And I was in Canada a year, I think, when all of that kind of came together. That was my year at the college in Canada. And so anyway, that's kind of the volunteer side of things, where they come from. The students come from different places, from the schools in the, some years ago, or not all that long ago. COVID really kicked the stuffing out of us, and we're quite fortunate to even still have the doors open and the lights on post-COVID. We would go to the schools at the beginning of term and do a little presentation, try and sort of invite students to come. Of course, the school schedule drives sort of our ability to have a class schedule in terms of the students going to school in the morning and the afternoon, or versus the afternoon. And so, kind of word of mouth. We have our Mexican instructors now are connected with the community far better than the expats were, and so we're able to put the word out that way to invite people to come. The students, when they join us, we ask them to commit for a year and to pay 400 pesos a month.
It's about $20
for the first 2 months.
Okay.
And if their attendance is, you know, satisfactory, consistent over the 2 months, then there's no further charge to them. They can stay with us for free. You know, students who for whom the 400 pesos a month is a challenge, that's not a problem. We'll waive that as essentially a scholarship. We have donors who will sort of donate to sponsor particular kids, as opposed to making a lump sum donation to the school. So there's, you know, the money's not an impediment. We about, I don't know, several years ago, they started there was a women's class was started, and it's been very successful and well attended. And so it basically runs 2 mornings a week right now, and we'll have anywhere from kind of, you know, 5 to 8 maybe ladies in that class at any given time. And it's an opportunity for them to, you know, in a safe environment with other women, to be exposed to power tools and measuring, and basically how to be creative with wood.
Now, what days are you open? Are you open 7 days a week, 5 days a week?
Yeah, at the moment,
hours and everything?
We're open 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, from about 9 till 5:30, with 2 classes scheduled a day. At the moment, Wednesdays, we have no classes on Wednesdays. There's Wayne Renz, our treasurer, has been just unbelievably successful as a fundraiser for the school, and there's a bingo logo that he runs on Wednesdays that supports the school. And so on Wednesdays at the moment, one of our instructors goes to help with the bingo, and it's kind of a good day for workshop, for tool maintenance, for prep, cleaning and stuff, repair around the workshop. I foresee, though, over the near term that we will get back to classes 5 days a week, so that would give us basically 10 classes a week. well, 10 slots, 5 classes. So five classes of people attending twice a week.
So you have bingo on Wednesday. Is that open to the public? Anybody can come and
It is, yes.
play? Because I love to play bingo.
Well, bingo, and it's at the restaurant there by the Pemex station in Ahik Village.
Okay.
Right beside it. The name of the restaurant is, I'll think of it in a second.
And it's from what time to what time?
I think it runs from about 1 o'clock, I think, in the afternoon. So people often come for lunch and stay for the bingo.
It's a restaurant. You go have lunch.
Yeah, El Sombrero is the name of the
El
restaurant.
Sombrero, play
Yeah.
bingo for a couple hours, and
That's right.
and maybe win a prize, and all the funding goes to help the school.
That's right.
So
Yeah, it's been,
that sounds like a fun deal.
I mean, Wayne has been a godsend for the school with our kind of getting our on a solid financial foundation, which we did not have for many years.
Well, that's one way that the expats that are living down here can have some fun, have a good lunch, play some bingo, maybe win a door prize.
Come shop at Total Bueno. Yeah, sure. I mean, if that's the
Now,
extent.
you also build things on consignment, don't you? If I want a certain little nook to put some towels in my bathroom and I can't find something, I could kind of maybe design it or kind of explain to you what I want.
Sure.
And then give you the money for the wood and maybe a donation for the time and energy, and then y'all could build it in 2, 3, 4 months, whatever.
Well-
Depending on the technologically advancement of the piece of furniture, y'all can build it, and then I buy it.
We did that for many years. COVID shut us down on that because we didn't have the volunteers and we weren't open to be able to receive orders, and so that particular function is dormant at the moment. But I've got an eye on getting it going again.
Okay.
But it's kind of dependent on having the right volunteers available to turn. What we don't want to do is accept an order that we can't deliver, or that we can't, that someone's not happy with. And
Sure.
so I'd rather not take the order.
Well, that
than
makes
have a
sense.
disappointed customer.
Sure.
And so at the moment, we've that got closed down with COVID and it hasn't been restarted. And in the early days, our model was our teacher would be building things for sale when he wasn't teaching classes in order to offset the cost of his salary. And our fundraising has gotten good enough to the point that that's not necessary anymore.
That's great.
But certainly, there's a benefit to the students to having a bit of a window on a mini production shop, seeing some production jobs going out the door that are being paid for. That's a useful kind of lesson for them to be able to see. So there's beyond just sort of us being able to serve the community that way. There's an educational function to be served with that too. At the moment, we're not back to that yet from post-COVID, but it's my intention to get there.
Well, we only got a couple more minutes. What would you like the expat audience to know that we haven't talked about,
That we haven't talked about.
that
Well,
you can close out on?
Sure. The shop is certainly welcome at any time to come and observe from the doorway, see what's going on, ask some questions when we can. There's lots of times in the day when we don't have students in the class, and you're welcome to come in and have a tour, look around and see what's going on, and ask how you might become a part of the crew. And certainly, there's those of us that are there pretty much daily, and those that come by a couple times a month. And there's certainly room for people with all different kind of life experience and skills to come in and see how they can fit and sort of help us keep the doors open and the lights on, and bring us students. I mean, we have lots and lots of expats who go, my maid's son is sort of teetering on the brink, he needs a focus, can he come and join the school? Certainly. So we find lots of students that way, actually.
Do you have a website or anything they can go and look at?
We do have a website.
Can you please give that information?
I believe it's havehammer.org. I don't know that it's certainly not being updated on a weekly basis.
Well, if you know a good IT guy, maybe.
Yeah, if you have somebody who wants to come and, exactly. And don't look at me. No, my IT days are over.
You gave that up. That's your past history.
Yeah.
Well, again, I want to say thank you very, very much for coming and sharing the information you did today about Have Hammer Well Travel.
Yeah.
And thank you for all you're doing for this community, not only for training and educating the kids or the men and women, but also giving us expats another opportunity to fulfill our lives.
Sure.
And make our time down here in the lakeside area more valuable, besides just, getting our handicap from a 45 down to like an 8 like I did.
Sure.
I literally played golf almost every day for 2 years. I lived on a golf course and I played 1 year. I set the course record. I played 320 days in 1 year.
Wow.
And 330 the next year.
Yeah.
The guy says, we're losing money on your membership. You got
I don't think I want to play for money with you.
That's right. But anyway, thank you very much for all you do, and we appreciate your time. And please get involved with I gotta say it right, Have Hammer Will Travel, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it if you're a student and or if you're a volunteer and want to come help out. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Crockett. We
Thanks so
appreciate
much.
it.
Yeah.
We'll see you again.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Expat Conversations with Michael Nolen. We'll see you again.
Happy trails.